In the deep, dark corners of the galaxy, Zara, a young alien girl from the intelligent race called the Virelians, was on her first mission. The Virelians were known for their sharp minds, logic, and reliance on technology. Raised on tales about ruthless humans, Zara believed they were violent beasts with no compassion. Every warning she had ever received drilled one message into her mind: stay away from humans. They destroy everything they touch. Zara's mission was simple: investigate a disturbance near a Virelian colony on the edge of their territory. Something strange was happening. Ships were vanishing, and no one knew why. She and her scouting team were deployed to gather information, but fear crept through their ranks. The whispers of human involvement haunted them. As they landed on the silent, barren world of Kryda IV, Zara's heart pounded. Every shadow seemed to contain a monster, every gust of wind a whisper of danger. The eerie silence was worse than any sound. Her team fanned out, weapons ready, scanning for signs of life. Suddenly, the report came through her communicator: movement detected nearby. Panic surged through the group. Weapons were drawn, safety locks released. It could only mean one thing: humans were here. Zara's heart raced as she followed her squad into the ruins of an old outpost. Her fingers trembled over the trigger of her plasma rifle. They turned a corner, and there he stood. A human. He was nothing like the savage beasts she had imagined. His armor was dented and scratched, and he moved with precision, scanning his surroundings with cautious focus. This was the enemy she had feared her whole life. Something didn't add up, but before Zara could process it, her team leader barked a command: engage. The command to engage echoed in Zara's mind, but something deep inside her screamed to stop. The human stood there, not raising his weapon, not attacking. His gaze met hers, and in that brief moment, she saw something unexpected: calmness. There was no aggression in his eyes, only a strange sense of curiosity, maybe even caution. Her squad fired the first volley. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, crackling as they hit nearby walls. The human reacted instantly, rolling into cover behind the remnants of an old control panel. He didn't shoot back. Instead, he called out in a language Zara could barely understand, the tone urgent but not hostile. Zara's pulse pounded in her ears as her teammates advanced. But she lingered. Something about this encounter didn't feel right. The stories had said humans attacked without warning, without reason. Yet this one hadn't fired a single shot. Zara, fire. Her commander barked. The rest of the squad closed in, weapons raised, ready to overwhelm their enemy. The human moved, swift but still not in the way she expected. With a practiced motion, he pulled a flare from his belt and ignited it. Bright, crimson light flooded the ruins, and Zara's heart sank. It wasn't just a flare. It was a signal. They're calling for reinforcements. One of her teammates shouted. Panic rippled through the group. Plasma weapons were recharged, ready to unleash a storm of fire. But Zara felt frozen. Something wasn't right. Why signal if he could have attacked first? Why waste precious seconds lighting a flare when he could have fired and ended the fight? Then, it happened. Deafening crash shook the ruins. From the distant sky, several ships broke through the clouds, descending fast. But these weren't human vessels. Their jagged designs and ominous black holes made Zara's heart drop. Pirates. Her commander cursed. Everything shifted in an instant. The pirates swarmed the ruins, weapons blazing. The Virelian squad scattered, ducking for cover as explosions rattled the air. Zara scrambled behind a broken wall just in time to avoid a plasma grenade that detonated nearby, showering her with debris. Amid the chaos, she saw the human again. Instead of taking advantage of the confusion to attack her or her squad, he did the unthinkable. He grabbed one of the fallen Virelians, hauling him over his shoulder and dragging him to cover. What? Zara whispered, disbelief washing over her. She watched as the human crouched beside her injured teammate, pulling out what looked like a medical device. A hiss of compressed air followed, and the Virilian groaned as a patch of synthetic skin sealed a gaping wound in his side. He saved him, Zara muttered, her mind reeling. The human looked up, his eyes meeting hers again. This time, there was no mistaking it. He wasn't just curious. He was trying to help. And in that moment, Zara realized everything she had believed about humans might be a lie. Before she could think further, the pirates advanced, their war cries echoing through the ruins. Plasma fire lit up the night, and Zara knew they wouldn't survive long if they stayed divided. The human barked something again. This time, it sounded like an order, but not directed at her. It was directed at the pirates. She didn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. The human stood, holding up a piece of strange tech that glowed ominously. The pirates faltered, recognizing the device. He shouted again, and the pirates hesitated, just long enough for Zara's team to regroup. "We have to move," the human shouted at her, his voice cutting through the noise. This time, Zara understood. Without thinking, she nodded. Zara and her remaining teammates sprinted through the crumbling ruins of Kryta IV, plasma blasts ripping the air around them. The pirates were relentless, hunting them like prey, but at every critical moment, the human intervened, firing suppressive shots, tossing flash grenades to disorient their enemies, and guiding the group toward safer ground. Her commander growled with distrust. "We can't follow him. He's leading us into a trap." Zara glanced at the human, who had stopped just ahead to scan their path with a handheld device. Every instinct in her told her this wasn't a trap. He could have let the pirates finish them off, but instead, he kept them alive. "Do you want to survive or not?" She snapped at her commander, surprising even herself with her sudden defiance. The commander scowled but didn't argue. The squad had no other choice. The pirates were too strong, and they were too exposed in the open streets. They needed the humans' help, whether they liked it or not. They followed the human through a narrow alley where debris and shattered metal provided some cover. Zara's mind buzzed with questions she couldn't ask. Why was he helping them? What did he want in return? The human's movements were precise, almost rehearsed, as if he had been in similar situations countless times before. He paused at a destroyed gate, knelt down, and activated a device on his wrist. With a faint hum, a holographic map flickered to life. He gestured toward a safer zone beyond the ruins. "We can hold them off there," he said, looking at Zara directly. His voice was calm, as if he had no doubt they could make it. Before she could respond, the commander grabbed her arm. "This is madness. We should be fighting, not trusting the human." Zara pulled free. "And die here? No thanks." The human watched their exchange in silence, waiting for their decision but clearly ready to move on his own if needed. There was no time to debate. Plasma bolts ricocheted off the walls around them, drawing ever closer. Zara made the call. "We follow him." The group sprinted toward the safe zone marked on the human's map. Along the way, Zara noticed something odd: how easily the human adapted to their movements, as if he fought alongside them for years. He didn't give orders, but his presence guided them, his quick decisions keeping them one step ahead of the pirates. They reached an abandoned bunker on the outskirts of the ruins, its heavy doors partially collapsed but still offering enough cover to stage a defense. As they ducked inside, Zara caught her breath, heart pounding from the adrenaline. "Why are you helping us?" she demanded, her voice sharp. She needed answers. The human leaned against a rusted pillar, catching his own breath. "I didn't plan on meeting you here," he said. "But pirates, they don't care who they kill. Human, Virilian, it's all the same to them." He knelt beside the injured Virilian he had saved earlier, checking the wound again. "I wasn't going to let you die just because we were supposed to be enemies." Zara stared at him, struggling to comprehend his words. All her life, she had been told that humans were bloodthirsty, ruthless monsters. But standing here in the middle of a battlefield, the only reason her team was still alive was because this human had decided to help. The commander glared at him, still suspicious. "What do you expect from us in return?" The human met his gaze, unflinching. "Nothing." Silence filled the bunker. Zara could tell that her teammates were just as confused as she was. Nothing. No demands. No hidden agenda. It didn't fit the stories they had been told. Suddenly, an explosion shook the ground outside, reminding them that the danger wasn't over. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the walls groaned under the force of the blast. The human turned toward Zara. "We can't stay here long. They'll breach this place soon." "Then what do you suggest?" her commander snapped. The human smirked. "We fight. Together." The idea sounded insane, but Zara saw no other option. The pirates vastly outnumbered them, and without the humans' knowledge and combat skills, they wouldn't last long. Her commander scoffed but didn't argue this time. "I don't trust you." "Good," the human replied with a grin. "Trust gets you killed." Despite herself, Zara couldn't help but smile. There was something strangely reassuring about the way he said it, like he had been through worse and survived. Maybe they could survive this too. She looked at her team, then back at the human. "All right," she said. "Let's fight." The moment Zara gave the order, her team snapped into action. The human had already moved toward the damaged bunker entrance, positioning himself where he could get a clear view of the advancing pirates. He tossed a small device to the ground, one that emitted a faint hum as it activated. Zara didn't recognize the tech, but she trusted its purpose. "We'll have a few minutes before they realize we've set up an energy barrier," the human explained, not looking up. His hands worked quickly, attaching something to the door's frame. "It won't last long, but it should give us enough time to prepare." Zara's commander glared but didn't object this time. It was clear they had little choice but to cooperate, even if every fiber of his being resisted trusting the human. The air inside the bunker was tense, thick with the weight of impending battle. Zara could feel it too. The fragile alliance they formed wouldn't last long. But for now, they needed each other to survive. Her heart raced as she prepared her plasma rifle, glancing at her team. Each one wore expressions of uncertainty, yet they were professionals, moving into position, securing exits, and recharging their weapons. Despite everything they had been taught, they were now fighting alongside a human. The very idea seemed surreal. From outside the bunker, the ominous sound of pirate ships hovering overhead grew louder. The clattering of their boots on metal floors echoed, and the harsh voices of their raiders barked orders. Zara peered through a small crack in the wall. The pirates were regrouping, setting up heavy artillery to breach their last line of defense. "We'll be overrun if they manage to break through," one of her teammates whispered. Zara knew he was right. But before she could respond, the human stood beside her, his face set in grim determination. "We won't give them that chance." He handed her a small device, no bigger than her palm, a thin smile on his face. "They think they're about to walk in and finish us off, but this will disrupt their systems. You need to get close enough to plant it on their artillery before they fire." Zara blinked, surprise washing over her. "You want me to go out there?" The human nodded, his expression serious. "It's the only way to stop their heavy guns. I'll cover you." Her commander snorted in disbelief. "You want to send her into a death trap? We'll never make it out of here." But Zara didn't need convincing. She wasn't sure why, but in that moment, she trusted the human's plan. He had saved them before, and right now, he was their best shot. She grabbed the device and nodded. "I'll do it." Without waiting for permission, Zara slipped through the bunker's back entrance, the human close behind. The pirates hadn't reached this side yet, giving them a brief window to move through the ruins undetected. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ran, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But there was no time for hesitation. They ducked behind a collapsed building, inches from the pirates' heavy artillery. The massive cannon stood on unstable legs, its operators unaware of their approach. Zara's hands shook as she activated the disruptor, the small device glowing softly in her hand. The plan was simple: get close enough to attach it and retreat before the pirates realized what had happened. On my signal, the human whispered, his eyes fixed on the pirates as they prepped the cannon. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she waited. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, the human darted out from cover, firing a barrage of shots that scattered the pirates. Zara seized the moment, sprinting toward the cannon. Her legs burned, but she didn't slow down. She reached the cannon's base, slapping the disruptor onto one of its control panels. The device clung to the metal with a magnetic grip, and within seconds, the cannon systems flickered, then shut down. But before she could turn back, a pirate spotted her. "There!" he shouted, raising his rifle. Zara's blood turned cold as the pirate's shot rang out. She braced herself for impact, but the blow never came. Instead, the human had leaped in front of her, taking the hit square in his shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't fall, his face twisted in pain. "Go!" he shouted, his voice strained. Zara didn't argue. She bolted back toward the bunker, her heart hammering in her chest. Behind her, the human laid down cover fire, keeping the pirates at bay long enough for her to escape. Back inside the bunker, Zara gasped for breath as her teammates rushed to her side. The commander looked at her with disbelief, then at the human who staggered in behind her, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "You did it?" her commander asked, still stunned. Zara nodded, her voice shaking. "The cannon's down. They won't be able to breach." The human leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "That'll buy us time, but we're not out of this yet." For the first time, Zara saw a flicker of respect in her commander's eyes as he looked at the human. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They had survived the first wave, and for now, that was enough. But the battle was far from over. The bunker's walls shook from distant blasts as Zara helped the human sit against a damaged support beam. His face was pale, and blood seeped from the wound in his shoulder. Despite the pain, he gave a small grin, his sharp eyes still alert. "Guess we make a good team after all," he said, voice strained but light. Zara knelt beside him, retrieving a medkit from her belt. She worked quickly, applying a stabilizer patch over the wound. "You shouldn't have taken that hit," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "I figured you're worth saving," he said with a lopsided smile, wincing as she tightened the bandage. Her commander observed the scene from a few steps away, still uneasy with the human's presence but unable to deny that his actions had saved their lives. Twice now. He crossed his arms, the hostility in his eyes now mixed with reluctant acceptance. "Why? Why help us?" The human shrugged, his voice steady despite the pain. "Survival's easier when you have someone watching your back." The simplicity of the answer caught Zara off guard. She had always believed humans acted purely out of self-interest or violence. But this one, he acted like someone who just wanted to survive, the same way they did. Before anyone could respond, a distant explosion rumbled through the bunker. Zara's heart sank as she realized the pirates weren't done. Outside, the sound of ships hovering overhead grew louder, and new pirate squads regrouped for another assault. "They won't stop," her commander muttered grimly, reloading his plasma rifle. "They'll tear this place apart to get to us." The human struggled to his feet, grimacing but determined. "Then we give them a reason to stop." He turned toward Zara, his gaze serious. "There's a comms beacon near the colony's outskirts. If we can reach it and send a distress signal, reinforcements might arrive before it's too late." Her commander scoffed. "That's suicide." "It's our only shot," the human said, locking eyes with Zara. "We can't hold this position forever." Zara knew he was right. Staying in the bunker would only delay the inevitable. They needed help, and fast. "I'll go with him," she said, surprising even herself. Her commander opened his mouth to argue but stopped. For once he saw the resolve in Zara's eyes and knew it was pointless. With a reluctant nod, The commander handed her an extra plasma pistol. "We'll hold the pirates off as long as we can. Get that signal out." Zara turned to the human, who gave her an approving nod despite the pain etched on his face. "Let's move." The two of them slipped through the ruins once more, the distant sounds of gunfire echoing behind them. Zara felt the weight of the mission pressing down on her. If they didn't reach the beacon, none of them would survive. The human, despite his injury, kept pace beside her, his movements fluid and efficient. As they reached the outskirts of the colony, Zara finally broke the silence. "You never told me your name." The human glanced at her, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "It's Elias, and you?" "Zara," she replied, the name sounding strange on her own lips, as if she had only just realized she existed outside the stories she had been told about humans. "Well, Zara," Elias said with a grin, "let's make sure we both live long enough to remember it." They crept toward the beacon, ducking between piles of wreckage to avoid pirate patrols. The COMS tower loomed ahead, its antenna cracked but still operational. Just a few more meters, and they would have a chance to call for help. Zara's heart pounded as they reached the base of the tower. She handed Elias a COMS relay device from her pack. "Think you can patch it in?" He gave a sharp nod and began working on the tower's interface, his fingers moving with practiced skill. Zara kept watch, her plasma rifle ready, scanning the ruins for any sign of movement. The seconds stretched painfully as Elias connected the relay and powered up the beacon. Small screen lit up, flickering as it searched for a signal. Zara held her breath. Then she saw it. Pirates, closing in fast. "Elias, we've got company," she warned, raising her weapon. Elias didn't look up, focused entirely on the COMS beacon. "Just need a few more seconds." Zara opened fire, her plasma bolts lighting up the ruins. The pirates returned fire, forcing her to duck behind a shattered wall. They were getting too close. If Elias couldn't send the signal soon, it would be over for all of them. "Got it," Elias shouted, slamming a final command into the console. The beacon pulsed to life, and a bright signal shot into the sky, broadcasting their distress call across the sector. Zara felt a flicker of hope. Help was on the way. But the pirates weren't backing down. One of them lobbed a grenade toward the tower, and Zara's heart stopped as it sailed through the air. Elias lunged, shoving Zara aside just as the grenade detonated. The blast knocked them both to the ground, ringing in their ears. Dust and debris filled the air, and Zara struggled to see through the haze. "Elias," she called, coughing as she crawled toward him. He lay a few feet away, battered but alive. His armor was scorched, and blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but he managed to give her a weak smile. "Told you I'd watch your back." Zara helped him sit up, relief washing over her. "Reinforcements better get here fast." "They will," Elias said with quiet confidence. "We just have to hold out a little longer." Zara nodded, gripping her rifle. Side by side, they prepared for the next wave. For the first time in her life, Zara found herself fighting not just for survival, but for something greater. She was fighting with a human, not against one. The distant hum of pirate ships and the clatter of boots marching through the ruins grew louder, sending a chill down Zara's spine. There was no time to celebrate the distress signal. They still had to survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Elias struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on Zara's shoulder. "We've made it this far," he muttered, wiping the blood from his brow. "No point in giving up now." Zara tightened her grip on her plasma rifle, her eyes scanning the horizon. The pirates were closing in fast. If they didn't hold their ground, the beacon would be destroyed, and with it, their only hope for rescue. "We hold the line," Zara whispered, mostly to herself. "We just need to hold." Elias flashed her a grim smile. "Let's give them a fight they'll never forget." The two took cover behind the remains of an old transport vehicle, its rusted hull providing minimal protection. Plasma fire streaked through the air, forcing them to duck as the first wave of pirates attacked. Zara returned fire, her shots precise and deliberate, forcing the enemy to slow their advance. Elias knelt beside her, firing bursts from his rifle. Despite his injury, his aim was sharp, each shot hitting its mark. "They're trying to flank us," he said, pointing toward a group of pirates slipping around their right side. "I see them," Zara muttered, adjusting her aim. With a deep breath, she fired 3 quick shots, cutting down the advancing pirates before they could get too close. The air filled with the sounds of battle, plasma blasts, shouted orders, and the distant roar of engines. Zara could feel exhaustion creeping in, but she pushed it aside. There was no room for weakness now. As the next wave surged forward, Elias reached into his belt and pulled out a small device. "Flash detonator," he explained. "Cover your eyes on 3. Zara nodded, bracing herself. 1, 2, 3. Elias tossed the device into the air, and it exploded in a blinding flash of light. The pirates cried out, disoriented, their weapons firing wildly in every direction. Zara didn't hesitate. She sprang from cover, her rifle blazing as she took advantage of their confusion. Beside her, Elias fought with relentless precision, his movements efficient and controlled despite the injury slowing him down. For a brief, exhilarating moment, it felt like they were winning. But the victory was short-lived. From the corner of her eye, Zara saw a pirate gunship descending, its cannons primed to destroy the beacon. Panic surged through her. If the beacon fell, everything they had fought for would be in vain. "We have to stop that ship," Zara shouted over the chaos. Elias followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "I'll draw its fire. You take out the pilot." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "That's suicide." Elias gave her a weary grin. "Not if you're fast." Before she could argue, he sprinted toward the gunship, firing wildly to grab the pilot's attention. The ship's cannons swiveled toward him, and Zara felt her stomach drop as plasma bolts rained down in his direction. "Damn it, Elias," she hissed under her breath, sprinting toward the ship. The pilot, focused on Elias, didn't notice Zara slipping through the wreckage. With steady hands, she aimed her rifle at the cockpit and fired. The plasma bolt shattered the glass, and the pilot slumped forward, the ship veering off course. Zara ducked as the gunship crashed into the ruins, its engine sputtering before exploding in a fiery blaze. The force of the blast knocked her off her feet, but she scrambled back up, adrenaline keeping her moving. Elias limped toward her, grinning despite the smoke and chaos. "Told you it'd work." "You're insane," Zara muttered, helping him back to cover. "But thanks." The ground shook as another wave of pirates approached, their numbers seemingly endless. Zara's hands trembled as she reloaded her weapon, exhaustion pressing down on her like a heavy weight. Then, through the haze of battle, she heard it. A distant rumble, growing louder with each passing second. "They're coming," Elias whispered, a hint of relief in his voice. "Reinforcements." Zara glanced up, her heart leaping as several Virulian and human ships appeared on the horizon, their engines roaring as they descended toward the battlefield. Bright streaks of plasma fire lit up the sky as the reinforcements engaged the pirates, driving them back. The pirates, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. Their ships lifted off, disappearing into the clouds, leaving behind the ruins and the smoldering wreckage of the battlefield. Zara slumped against the remains of the transport vehicle, her chest heaving with exhaustion. "We did it," she whispered, hardly believing it. Elias sat beside her, his expression tired but triumphant. "Yeah," he said softly, "we did." As the smoke cleared and the battlefield quieted, Zara and Elias sat side by side, their breath heavy with exhaustion. The sounds of distant engines grew fainter as the pirate ships retreated beyond the horizon. The reinforcements, a mix of Virulian and human vessels, secured the area, ensuring no more enemies lurked among the ruins. Zara looked toward the sky, watching the stars peek through the dust clouds. The strange, quiet calm settled over her, and for the first time since the mission began, she allowed herself to breathe. "They'll write songs about this battle," Elias said with a grin, leaning his head back against the wreckage. His armor was battered, his face smeared with dirt and dried blood, but there was a strange lightness in his voice, a humor Zara found oddly comforting. She gave him a tired smile. "They'll probably leave out the part where I had to save you." Elias chuckled, wincing slightly from the pain in his shoulder. "Fair enough, but I think we can agree. If it weren't for me, you'd be toast." Zara rolled her eyes but didn't argue. "You're not exactly what I expected." "Yeah, what were you expecting?" She paused, searching for the right words. "A monster." Elias gave her a sideways glance, raising an eyebrow. "And now?" Zara hesitated, then shook her head with a small smile, still figuring that out. Before Elias could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. A squad of Virilian soldiers, led by a stern-looking captain, marched toward them. Behind them, several human officers followed, exchanging nods of mutual respect. The Virilian captain glanced at Zara, then at Elias, his expression unreadable. "You two are lucky to be alive," he said bluntly. Zara stood, brushing the dust from her uniform. "It wasn't just luck." She gestured toward Elias. "We wouldn't have survived without him." The captain raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. He looked between the two of them, as if struggling to reconcile the sight of a Virilian soldier standing beside a human. But after a long moment, he nodded. "Good work, both of you." As the reinforcements secured the area, Zara and Elias lingered at the edge of the battlefield, watching the soldiers work. The strange alliance between humans and Virilians seemed tentative but promising, like the first steps toward something new. "So," Elias said, breaking the silence, "what happens now?" Zara glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "I guess we go back to our lives." Elias gave a small, tired laugh. "Back to hating each other." Zara smirked. "Maybe not hating." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they had experienced settling between them. Zara realized that her entire worldview had shifted in just a few hours. Everything she had believed about humans, about their savagery and cruelty, had been shattered by Elias's actions. And perhaps, she thought, humans weren't the only ones who had been misunderstood. "Hey," Elias said softly, drawing her attention. "If our paths cross again, try not to shoot me." Zara chuckled. "No promises." Elias gave her a playful salute, his grin wide despite the exhaustion on his face. "See you around, Zara." She nodded, watching as he turned to join his own kind, limping slightly but still standing tall. Something inside her stirred, a strange mixture of respect, gratitude, and curiosity. As Zara rejoined her squad, her commander shot her a wary glance. "You trust that human?" Zara thought for a moment, then gave a small shrug. "I trust him more than I did before." Her commander grunted but said nothing more. Zara knew it would take time for old prejudices to fade, on both sides, but today they had taken the first step. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Epilogue. A new beginning. In the days that followed, stories of the battle on Kryta Ivy spread across both Virilian and human networks. The tales of Zara and Elias, once enemies, now unlikely allies, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, trust and cooperation could bloom between the unlikeliest of beings. Back on her homeworld, Zara found herself looking at the stars differently. They no longer felt like distant, dangerous places filled with enemies. Instead, they were filled with possibility, worlds waiting to be explored, new alliances waiting to be forged. And somewhere out there, she knew, was a human named Elias, someone who had saved her life, shattered her beliefs, and reminded her that the stories they were told weren't always the truth. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but one thing was certain: Zara would never see it the same way again.